There's another overlooked section. Let's start with the Book of Kings here because this is relevant to us. Messiah should be in charge of national defense. Who was Yehu and who was Ben Hadad? Very interesting piece of historical information. Ben Hadad was the king of Aram. Ben Hadad is first mentioned here in the reign of King Asa. Asa with an Aleph Samich Aleph. What happened then? About 16 years into his reign, based on, it's not explicit, but if you compare the psukim, you get it basically around 16 years into his reign. King Basha of the 10 tribes attacked Asa, who was a relatively righteous king, one who gets a passing grade in the eyes of the Navi. He reigned for 40 years. He was King Solomon's great-grandson. And Basha basically had this little border skirmish with him, who's going to seize the territory. And Asa made what perhaps was a mistake in the eyes of the Navi. He realized he couldn't fight Basha, so he sent a gigantic bribe to Ben Hadad, the king of Aram, saying, okay, could you take care of this other king and take care of the 10 tribes for me? And he was more than happy to oblige. And from then on, this Ben Hadad was a thorn in the side of the kings of Israel. Asa reigned for 40 years. It was about 16 years into his reign where he basically invited Ben Hadad to cause problems for the northern kingdom. And this Ben Hadad continued causing problems for the Jewish people throughout the reign of Yehoshaphat, who was Asa's own son and successor. Ben Hadad's mentioned as making war with Achav, Melech Yisrael, who was a few decades after this Basha, who was originally paid to attack. And eventually, Elo Hanavi was told, this Ben Hadad needs to be replaced by Hazael. Hazael is his servant, not his son. Hazael is going to assassinate him. Sometime late in the reign of Achav's successor, Yehoram, who's going to be assassinated and replaced by Yehu's own line, Hazael took over. By my calculations, this Ben Hadad was easily king for perhaps 50 years. He was king of Aram for 50 years, and that time he caused problems for the Jewish people throughout. Hazael killed him and took over, and it says that when Yehu took over, and Yehu got rid of Baal and the entire dynasty of Achav and his family, it's still, God kept Ben Hadad around for a long time, Hazael around for a long time to cause problems for the Jewish people.
Why does he have a...
What?
Is his name Hebrew or Aramaic?
So it's sort of both. It's not exactly Aramaic and not exactly Hebrew, but they all had Semitic names. You look, let's say the Edomites. What was their language? The ancient Ammonites and Moabites. What was their language? So you look at, let's say, the Mesha stele. Mesha was around also at this time. Mesha, king of Moab. He also had war with Yehoram, Achav's son. And he writes about his rebellion against Achav. Okay. So he's a major figure. So you look at the Mesha stele and you decipher what it says there. It's not Tanakh Hebrew and it's not Gemara Aramaic. He says Arba'an Shat. What's Arba'an Shat? Arba'im Shana. In Aramaic, Shata, Hashata, means this year. So Shat, Shin Taf, is years. Arba'an Shat. So he spells it Aleph, the equivalent of Aleph Resh Bet Ayin Nun, if I'm not mistaken. So you see that ancient Moabite language and Ammonite language was a form of Hebrew. Technically speaking, they are considered B'nai Aver. Remember, 70 nations with 70 languages. Aver is one of them. Avram Avinu comes from Aver. Ammon and Moab come from Avram Avinu's nephew. So they're technically speaking types of Hebrews. Edomites are called our brothers throughout the Torah. What was their language? What was the Avodah Zarah of the Edomites? Something, but basically whatever we dig up from that area is sort of a Proto-Hebrew. Just like Phoenician Hebrew is sort of a Hebrew, but not exactly biblical Hebrew. But you could decipher it. We know that the Ammonites and Moabites worshipped gods like Milcom, Chemosh, and Molech, right? Those are the gods mentioned up there. And the Baalim, Ashtaroth, usual stuff, Baal Peor. Those are the gods of the east, the eastern side of the Jordan River, right? What did the Edomites worship? Apparently, one of their gods around that area was Hadad. But other than that, it seems that they had a similar religion to ours. Avodah Zarah, but similar religion. Isn't that interesting?
What do you mean by Avodah Zarah but similar? Is it monotheistic?
They had perhaps sometimes it border monotheistic, but then they had this Hadad around. You go look in the museums about this. Or what was their mode of worship? Did they have idols?
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah. So what was Esau's religion? It's very interesting. In Tanakh, there's very little mention of. Mostly, we know about the foreign gods of the various peoples, right?
Mhm.
We know the name of the Babylonian gods, for example, and the Persian gods. They're mentioned in the Torah. We know about the Greeks and their language. Yavin was born before Avram Avinu was born, so they existed back in the day. Very little contact, but we knew they were around. And you could look in the history books; they had their usual gods. They had Zeus and the rest of them. And in Egypt, there's no lack of knowledge of the usual Egyptian gods. Right? So we knew about these things. Of course, about Canaanite gods. Asherah and Baal, El, Mot, Yam, the rest of them.
Why did they worship Asherah with a tree?
I don't know. We could look it up. These things are quite well known. The fertility cult is quite well known, though. So my point is, this Ben Hadad, whose name is common among, let's say, Edomites and Arameans, means son of Hadad, and Hadad something might be a god. It's a common name. Chazael killed Ben Hadad. Chazael's successor and son was also called Ben Hadad. So Chazael caused problems for Jewish people. Basically, it was the Judean kings who brought Ben Hadad into the picture, the Arameans, and they were a real problem for the 10 tribes for many generations. And these kings had quite the longevity. So it says here about Ben Hadad, Bayamim Haim Hichel Hashem lekatzot Yisrael. What's lekatzot? Either he became disgusted, it has the word God was upset, or starting to remove tracts of lands from the Jews. The Jewish people, the 10 tribes, started losing territory. This is the reign of Yehu. Yehu had destroyed the Baal and got rid of the Omorite dynasty, and now his own dynasty is going to last for like 100 years. But Yehu himself still kept up the policies of Yehu and Ben Hadad, which was no pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Instead, go to Dan and Beit El to worship golden calves there. So he almost gets passing grade, and God's happy for him and rewards him, but then he falls into the same trap every other king before him fell, the Yerovam policy. So it says that this is a problem. God is upset at the Jewish people. Vayakem Chazael v'chol gevul Yisrael. Chazael, the king of Aram, who was Ben Hadad's successor, in the time that the Jewish, basically Ben Hadad was king of Aram throughout the reigns of Basha and Elah, Zimri, Omri, Achav, and Yehoram. Okay, he spans 6 kings of the 10 tribes. He dies he was very sick and dying, and Hazael basically just let him strangle on his own towel or something like that. That's apparently what it says. Wet the towel and put it over his face and suffocated him. The Navi told him to do that, basically. The Navi said, you're going to be king after Ben Hadad. God has ordained it. So Hazael became king. Hazael is going to be king now through the reign of Yehoram and Yehu's son Yehoachaz, and Yehoash. Okay, the first 3 kings of the Yehu line. They all have to deal with Hazael. So this Hazael caused them problems. Min hayardein mizrach hashemesh et kol eretz hagilad hagadi va'ruveni va'manashi me aroer asher al nachal arnon va'gilad va'bashan. Basically, Hazael is basically taking back. He was causing problems for all the tribes on the other side of the Jordan River. And the description of this area is basically what Moshe Rabbeinu describes as that which Am Yisrael conquered from Sichon and Og. It's the same words. It's almost verbatim. So that was a problem. And it continues into the reign of Yehu's son. And by the way, this Chazai also caused problems for the Jews in the south, for the Judean kingdom. He attacked Yehoash, the boy king. Yehoash was 6 when he took the throne, basically, or 7. No, 7 years old. And he had a 40-year reign. And eventually his own servants assassinated him. He went off the derech. But it says, toward the end of his reign, he also had a battle with Hazael. Hazael took the throne before he was even king. So this child, Yehoash, was 7 years, the first 7 years of his life in hiding as a baby. And then he took the throne. He's going to pass away at the age of 47. So he's there, and Hazael is going to make a war with him late in his reign. That means Hazael was king easily for at least 40 years. It was quite a long time. Now, if not more than that. So he's causing problems here. It says here, in the reign of Yoash ben it was Yoachaz's reign. Yoachaz was Yehu's son. It says here, Vayichar af Hashem b'Yisrael, God was angry at Israel. Vayitneim biyad Chazael melech Aram uvyad Ben Hadad ben Chazael kol hayamim. God delivered them into the hands of this Chazael, king of Aram, just the second one we're discussing, and in his son Ben Hadad. Yeah, that was the first Ben Hadad, but he also his own son is called Ben Hadad.
He named his son after he killed.
No, it was just a common Aramean name. Well,
it's a little bit strange.
It's still a little bit strange. So they cause problems, and finally it says in the reign of Yehoash that things Yehoash. There's two Yoashes: Yoash, king of Yehuda, and Yoash, grandson of Yoachaz of Yehu. Wachazael melech Aram lachatz et Yisrael kol yemei Yehoachaz. Chazael was still king during the reign of Yehoachaz. That was Yehu's successor. These bad guy Arameans, they have, like I said, a heck of a longevity. The Jewish people switch a king, sometimes naturally, he dies of natural causes and succeeded by his son. Sometimes there's an assassination and a coup, a new dynasty. So I basically said that this is some of Yehoram's 28 years, Yehu's 17 years. Okay. How long was Chazael king? All 28 years of Yehu, all 17 years of Yehoachaz, and into the reign of Yehoash. So 28 plus 17 is already how much? 45 years, plus some of Yehoram before that, and well into the reign of the next king. So well more than 45 years, Chazael was king. And Ben Hadad himself, as we saw, was basically king at least for a good 50 years also. So these two wicked kings of Aram who caused problems for the Jewish people, they span a century. And it says, "Vayachon Hashem otham vayirachamim vayifen alehem." God had compassion on the Jewish people finally. Leman britho. So he didn't want to destroy them. Vayomoth Chazael melech Aram vayimloch Ben Hadad beno tachtav. Finally, Chazael, king of Aram, died. His son Ben Hadad reigned after him. Vayashav Yehoash ben Yoachaz vayikach et Arim Yav Ben Hadad ben Chazael. He took back the cities, territory he lost from this from Ben Hadad. Asher lakach miyad Yoachaz avi b'milchama, that he had taken from his own father in war. There was a resurgence. Shalosh pamim he called Yoash vayashav vayashev et Arei Yehuda Yisrael. Sorry, vayashev et Arei Yisrael. And this apparently was early in his own reign. So we have a problem here. The Jewish kings, the Israelite kings, took national defense quite seriously. That was all they lived for. But when God was upset at them, he allowed their adversaries to stay basically with a certain permanence. We saw that it was just basically two Aramean kings who spanned quite a few generations of our own dynasties who caused us this problem. By the way, the same thing is said about the Philistines. Normally, in times of the judges, what happened? There was a regression. So, you're leaving now?
No, it's cool.
Yeah. There was a regression, and then the Jewish people are oppressed by, I don't know, some locals, some neighboring enemy, and then a shofet arises and overthrows them, right? That was basically the pattern throughout the times of the judges. But the Philistines broke that pattern. Why? Because it says the Philistines took over, and then Samson arose, but he only started the process. And throughout the time that Eli was in charge also, the Jews couldn't shake off the yoke of the Philistines. And during the Samuel's time also, yes, he had successful campaigns against the Philistines, but they're still in charge. And throughout the time of Shaul was never free of the Philistines. How many major wars did Saul have with the Philistines in the book of Samuel? 3. Aside from the ongoing war, but 3 major wars against the Philistines are described there in the first book of Samuel. And then King David himself has to continue the whole thing. The Philistine domination of the land of Israel also basically spans a century. And we don't hear about one particular Philistine ruler who was in charge. They had the Sarnei Plishtim, 5 Sarnei Plishtim, 5 major city-states. Achish, king of Gath, but all the other ones aren't mentioned really. It doesn't really matter. Maybe they come and go. So it's something we have to know. This is the story of the Yehu's dynasty, and the problems that their people faced is a good lesson for us today. And also what happened to Achaz and Chizkiyahu. We shouldn't forget these things. Jewish people need to study Tanakh and know it so they can understand what's going to happen. One of the ways we can understand what's going to happen to us and what God expects of us is by looking into our own history through the eyes of the prophets. Very important. I can't understand why it is that others people don't spend so much time doing this. We don't understand what God wants of us. God, Yechezkel Navi says that God, one of the stages in the redemption is he's going to remove the bad leadership. The Ro'im, the shepherds, they're the ones who are the problem. God likes his sheep, or good soldiers, good people. But when the problem is the people in charge, we don't have proper shepherds. But then again, you get the people you deserve. You get the leaders you deserve, so-called leaders, or the oppressors.